I often talk about Facebook as being the ultimate platform for protest. And if you look realistically right now in the world, when people get upset about something, the place they typically go to express their discontent is usually Facebook first, because it's so easy to do. All they do is put it in a status update. And if people agree with them, then suddenly these memes can spread very rapidly, and especially if they create a group like Oscar Morales did in Colombia and had 10 million people in the streets, or a page that somehow is devoted to this topic. The viral capabilities of this network, which can take an idea and spread it very quickly among a community, can make it grow very quickly. You know what? I actually think the technology exists to do it, and what we don't have yet is the attitudes. That in fact, and that's an interesting point, because the attitudes of citizens in almost every country are behind the technological capability. So in fact, we really have the platform that could enable global government, to be specific. But we have all these entrenched interests that are political and financial and ethnic and tribal that are clearly preventing it for the time being. And the question is, as these technologies get better and better at facilitating it, which they will that begin to erode some of the barriers that do exist because of tribalism and nationalism and closed-mindedness? And I don't know. I will say that there is a view that we're going to see a remaking of government around social media. And if you look at a product like Causes on Facebook, which is a service that's initially focused on nonprofit fundraising, but what they really aim to do long term is to empower citizens to basically create their own political parties. And those political parties do not necessarily have to have a national constraint. So, we have green parties in a lot of countries. That would maybe be the first party you might begin to see coalescing on a global basis. Well, I think what governments are starting to realize, and they're generally finding it out the hard way, is they don't really have any choice but to respond to what's happening in social media and on the internet, because activism is occurring there and organizing is occurring there. Look, a really interesting example of this is in Canada right now, because the Prime Minister of Canada has had this sort of idea to sort of do some restrictions on parliamentary behavior. And there's a huge, what they call Anti-Prorogation movement on Facebook and elsewhere, where there's 200,000 people on Facebook joined this group protesting the Prime Minister's ideas. That then gets so big that even though the social media itself isn't changing the government, it gets covered in the offline media and it becomes a big factor in the debate. It's like, I often say that when you have a big enough group on Facebook, when you have 200,000 people in Canada saying one thing, it's as if 200,000 people went to Ottawa all together and stood there holding placards. It doesn't change things overnight to have a demonstration, but the media likes to have the focus of proof that there is a citizen movement, and then they pick up on that, and the columnists and the politicians jump on board, and this is how these things tend to happen. But I think politicians are not going to really have any choice but to be paying attention to these things. And if I were a politician, not only would I be using Facebook and Twitter and a lot of whatever local social media might be prevalent to campaign to be elected, but you have to keep your ear to that at all times, because this is where opinions are now being formed, I think.